Well, that work was done a long, long time ago, 30 years actually ago. And subsequent to that, there's been a lot more work. I would say, more better work, like more data, better analysis, and so on. And most of those studies have more or less found the same answer as we originally found, which is that for the kind of minimum wage increases that you see now, there's not too much of an employment effect. The most recent one that I think is quite interesting was a study of what happened in Germany. They didn't used to have a minimum wage, and they introduced one. And there was some individual firms were hurt, but mostly the workers were all definitely better off. And so there wasn't a loss of jobs, but there's some movement from some low-wage small firms to bigger firms. I suspect there could be, but I haven't seen anything too detailed on that. I think in the case of Germany, they were originally expecting that it would be different effect in the poorer part of the country, the eastern part of the country, which used to be part of what's called East Germany. And it doesn't seem like that happened, actually. So that was kind of a surprise, I think, to many people. A few years, I would say. I think, for one thing, so we had maybe 8% inflation last year. Wages only went up a couple of percent, maybe 4%. So most workers are actually earning less in real terms than they did before. At the same time, there's lots of good job opportunities. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure for employees that look for better jobs to try and make up for their inflation, and then that's going to lead to some persistence in the wages continuing to go up. Normally, it takes a few years to get inflation back down. We haven't had much experience with it since the 80s. So. But the Fed is trying very hard right now, and I suspect that we're going to have a recession. I suspect. I think, for instance, the housing market is already starting to show signs of that because interest rates are so much higher, so mortgage costs are higher, so I think that you'll see fairly, some sizable rise in unemployment. Maybe not like a major recession, but a significant jump. What the Fed guys are hoping is that they can get the unemployment rate doesn't go up too much, but job vacancies go down, and everybody kind of slows down the rate of hiring. Of course, from the point of view of workers, that means workers have now lost real terms, and they want to kind of keep it low. So in a way, what the Fed wants to do is say, okay, you guys all took a loss, and you're just going to keep it. You're not going to be able to catch up. So if you're kind of on the point of view of workers, it's kind of too bad for workers. Well, it depends on what some of the sources of the inflation, like sort of like gas prices and oil prices. You can't really raise wages for that. That's a reduction in your standard of living. But some of the other ones were just excess demand. Like, there was a lot of pent-up demand for workers after COVID, and maybe partially because of stimulus funds. So in that case, you could argue that we would expect wages to go up, but they're probably not going to keep up with inflation, that's for sure. Normally, when the Fed goes through a significant tightening, unemployment rates go up a couple of percents, 2, 3, 4 percentage points, depends on the scenario. Then what happens then is a lot of firms fail. Small firms go to business. Homeowners who can't make their payments lose their houses. So you get people having to walk away from mortgages and stuff. So I think it's usually very bad news for workers, and it's usually most difficult for. It's not going to matter too much for somebody who's a tenured professor at a university. So it usually matters more for lower skilled workers and people that are just starting on their careers. It's very bad for small businesses too, especially new small businesses. So you just try to open a restaurant, and now comes this, and you lose all your investment. And it's probably the hardest on people that have had to borrow money to start a business, because then their cost of borrowing money is going to go up. So anybody that's working for a company that is got a lot of debt or is sensitive to debt. So if you're, car sector is probably going to go down a little bit. I mean, there's different angles on that. I think if you have cash and you don't have to borrow it, then it might not be crazy to say, well, this is a good investment. Because right now, if you, I can tell you though, if in California, for instance, the big recession we had in 2008, we own a house here in Berkeley and one in Sonoma.
Yeah.
The house in Sonoma fell by 40%. If you think, well, I'll buy a house, and now it's gone back up, but you can't predict that. You shouldn't think that housing prices are going to keep going up. When you get a recession, they sort of slow down at the beginning, and then they drop, and it takes a long time for them to recover. So when I first moved to California in 1997, there was a major housing recession in 91, 92, and it took 5 years for it to. So the rebuild of the housing market is very slow usually. Same with the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. Really, housing prices didn't get going again until 2013, 14, except in the really best markets. If you're in central San Francisco or something, it's different. But if you're in a kind of suburban Fremont or something, it's going to be slow to come back.
Oh.
So one example would be where we're using a lot of AI is in, say, package delivery. Okay, so the sorting of all these packages at Amazon or whatever, UPS, a lot of that is done with optical recognition and charting it and moving it and deciding how to put it on trucks and so on. And so what that's done is meant that everybody gets their stuff in 2 days. And they want to have their stuff in 2 days instead of 2 weeks. And now if they want it in 2 days, we need more people. So it's actually increased the demand for labor in that case. In other cases, it reduces the demand for labor. If you go to a modern place that makes automobiles, cars, there's a lot of robots. The robots they've had robots making cars since I worked at GM in 1974, believe it or not, as a student in college. And we had robots then to do the painting. And now, all of the terrible jobs are all done by robots. Because painting is an awful job because it's very toxic, and you have the paint is charged with electricity, so it attaches onto the metal really well. You could really better not to have any humans in there. So you can improve the product with the technology, I think, in a lot of cases. Or some of these really crappy jobs in underground and mining and stuff is technological. So I think probably most economists think that when you have new technology, there's some disruption of the labor market, but inevitably people think of new stuff they want, right? so as long as people think of new stuff they want, there's always going to be some role for people to do it. Like for instance, services, like everybody wants their food and their stuff delivered, right? That's a lot of people.
Create more jobs.
More jobs.
Congo, she's moved to Britain.
Oh, okay.
He is Chinese Australian. Where's David? Oh, Dave. He's Korean. He's Indian. He's Indian.
It's so diversity. It's pretty good.
She's from Peru. This guy's from Chile. This guy's from French Canada.